he had such a chip on his shoulder. He was such a I don't mean this on a personal level, but he was so mean. He had the intensity about him all the time.
Hey, welcome to Beat Everyone. I'm Ben Flanagan with AL.com, and today we're going to blind rank offensive coordinators and the scariest players in Alabama football. But first, we just witnessed a golden era at a certain position during the Nick Saban era in Tuscaloosa. Era is the word, Matt. And we just saw a former player reach the greatest heights you can possibly reach in the sport. So we're going to build the perfect Alabama quarterback. And joining me as usual to do this is Beat Everyone producer Matt Scalici. What's up, Matt?
What's up, Ben?
So what do you think? Like, where do we start with building the perfect Alabama quarterback? I think that, there are a lot of players, a lot of fans who would probably tell you that, like, you could just pick one of the quarterbacks and they are the perfect Alabama quarterback.
Well, look, the thing about that is, and look, I'm sure we'll get into this, there's only two of them who ever had a perfect season at Alabama, two and a half, arguably. But even those guys, they had off games, they had weaknesses where people sort of figured them out a little bit. So I feel like we can at least spread the love here.
Yeah. Okay. Well, it's interesting because all of the quarterbacks sort of have a specialty in a way where there are some all-around guys. You have these guys who went first round, first overall in one case, but you could probably zero in on one aspect of their skill set that you would rather have among the rest of what they're so good at doing. So where do we start here? What aspect of the quarterback position do you think is like the foundation of what makes them a good quarterback, or how people at least perceive a good quarterback?
I think we got to do arm first up. I like your basic combination of can he make all the throws?
Okay. Well, so arm, you want me to go first here?
You go first here, Ben.
I'm gonna go deep ball Jake Coker for arm. I mean, who threw a prettier deep ball than Jake Coker? I mean, look, he had a lot of intangibles, and we'll get to that category in a little while. Nobody would describe Jake Coker as the perfect Alabama quarterback,
right,
but he has the distinction of being the only Nick Saban era quarterback to never lose a game that he started in the position, right? The only game he didn't start was obviously that Ole Miss game where Cooper Bateman did. He comes in, tries to bring Alabama back, but this guy just launched it. And like, whether it was, a 50-yard throw downfield or if it was like a 7-yard out route, the ball was coming in hot. And so for that reason, I'm going Jake Coker for arm. What about you?
It's kind of the equivalent of a golfer who absolutely smashes it off the tee every time, and like the rest of it, he's okay at.
Right.
Yeah. But yeah, you know what? So I'm going the other way from you, Ben, and I'm going with Tua on this category because Tua, when I think about making all the throws, yes, the deep ball is cool, and I think Tua threw a very good deep ball and perhaps underrated. I can't remember how many times Alabama scored, in one play drives because Tua just gunned it down the field to one of his receivers. But I think the thing about Tua was it was everything. It was all the little things. It was hitting guys perfectly in stride on crossing routes, out routes, knowing when to dump off to a running back in the key situation. And he just didn't throw bad passes to any part of the field. His touch was perfect. His timing was perfect. So that's where I'm going when I think of having the perfect arm for a quarterback.
I think it's a good pick. There are people out there, especially NFL fans, who often call Tua a noodle arm, and they say he can't throw down the field. I never understood that as somebody who obviously watched every snap that he played at Alabama. I've seen enough absolutely perfect, just dime deep balls from Tua to know that he can and often has and does throw downfield. We've seen it at that level with Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle at this point. So I don't buy into those theories that Tua doesn't have an arm. So it's a good pick. It's a good pick. I think Coker can probably throw it a little further than Tua,
I bet if we
but
lined them up and said who can throw it further, Coker gets
but
it.
it's, you could throw it 100 yards, and that doesn't necessarily mean, quote unquote, it's a good arm, right? Like arm, that could mean a lot of different things. All
Yeah,
right,
I mean,
we got our arm. What's next?
all right. So next up, we're going for brain, the really very most important body part for a quarterback, arguably.
Yeah, probably so, because you've got to process everything that you see. You've got to make good decisions. You've got to have pocket presence. You've got to understand the playbook and the scheme, and you've got to communicate that to everybody on offense so they're all in sync and you're playing winning football. I'm going with Bryce Young for brain. I think that like this guy was always a cerebral assassin was a good way to describe him. Somebody you could see processing everything in real time, seeing everything downfield. I think vision plays into this too. He had arguably the best vision of any quarterback where he could make something happen out of nothing because he knew where everybody was going to be, even when he was in scramble mode and he was kind of panicking and had to make decisions in a split second. So Bryce Young, always a guy who could just kind of do anything at the position. And he's one of these guys who kind of has everything other than maybe, I don't know, size is what people would
Sure.
probably use as a knock against him. But the guy was just always so smart, could process anything and make he seemed to make the right decision almost 100% of the time.
Yeah, good pick there. I am going for almost all the exact same reasons you just said. I am going with Mac Jones. And I think it's that when you talk about the speed of a quarterback's thought, the ability to look at the field and process everything so quickly. I don't know that anybody's ever done it better than Mac Jones at the college level that I've seen. He was a perfect fit for what Steve Sarkisian wanted to do, where the ball has to come out so quickly. There's receivers doing things that you don't expect them to do in places you don't expect them to be, and Mac had it all in his head. And that's the perfect season offensively for Alabama. And it's because Mac Jones was able to operate that offense so perfectly. I am going to throw a quick honorable mention on here, though, to Greg McElroy in this category, because I think he did what he did with a different kind of team than Mac Jones had. Mac Jones had and I think he deserves all the credit he gets. He had arguably the greatest collection of offensive talent that's ever been on one team. And I think Greg did it with a little bit less talent around him. And I think that he had to make some different kinds of decisions than Mac did. And one of the things I think about with Greg is that SEC championship game and making some a guy who was not a mobile quarterback and not a runner and made some key choices to take off and run with the ball and then made really smart decisions when he was doing that. To me, that's a guy with a lot of awareness and a lot of understanding of what's going on in the game and what he can get away with.
Yeah, and his reputation was being a smart guy, right? Like
Right,
what was
sure.
he was a Rhodes
Rhodes
Scholar, like
Scholar.
semifinalist or
That's right.
finalist or something. He had a super high Wonderlic score test, so he was always kind of considered the brainiac quarterback. So that's a good pick or a good honorable mention anyway. I had Mac Jones as my honorable mention there, so it was a good pick. But then you said speed when you were describing Mac Jones, and that's a different category, right? Like you're talking about
I'm talking
processing.
about
I know, I'm just kidding.
brain speed.
You would
Yeah.
never associate speed with Mac Jones, other than
No.
maybe his release, his throw release. Okay,
I feel
what's
like
next?
I feel like he had some decent scrambles. I don't know.
He did. I'm just kidding. I'm just giving
Uh,
a hard time.
we're going with accuracy next, Ben, which is a little different than arm. To me, this is less about the power you're throwing it with and more, I guess, somewhat efficiency, like not throwing a bad ball ever.
This is Tua. This is Tua Tagovailoa. I mean, what it was it Brian Daboll who famously said that like Tua can hit the keyhole or whatever. Like I
Mm-hmm.
forget what the exact quote was, but Tua just put it wherever it needed to be. And you mentioned like the slant routes. Like I mean, he just put the ball on the money every single time and gave the receivers the best chance to score. Like even on these like short routes that they were running. And he could throw that deep ball beautifully. I mean, you go back and watch the Tennessee game, I think in the 2018 season where he
Yeah.
hits Jalen Waddle with one of the most beautiful downfield throws I've seen in my life, actually. But then you've got, again, like, throw the ball anywhere on the field. I mean, Tua is making the throw. I mean, I go back to the 2018 Orange Bowl when they played Oklahoma, and Kyler Murray has won the Heisman Trophy. And now you've got, Tua, who I believe finished second that year. A lot of Alabama fans felt like he should have won it. I mean, had he not been pulled for the second half of so many games, Tua probably wins the Heisman that year. But I mean, he outduels Kyler Murray in a big way. The guy goes 24 of 27 for 318 yards and 4 touchdowns. Just absolutely ridiculous, proving that he was the best quarterback on the planet in college football in that moment. And he had done it all year in 2018. He was just a killing machine, and it was largely because of his accuracy too. It's talking about Loa. If you want to build a quarterback based on accuracy at any level, he's the guy. Even at the NFL level, guy's accurate.
Yeah, I think he's going to come up a lot here just because, and look, Tua had some obvious deficiencies that have caught up to him a couple of times in his career, but just, if we're playing 7-on-7 football, if we're playing past skill, I don't know that it gets a lot better than Tua. I will throw Bryce Young in here because I think when I think of perfect, on the money passes, there's quite a few that come to mind from Bryce, particularly I would say the 2 key passes in that Iron Bowl in 2021. But really, I mean, that entire final drive, he was having to make incredibly tough passes that were being really well defended, and he put the ball on the only place it could be. There was a fourth down pass I remember to a tight end that you just thought, this is it. There's no way they're completing this pass, and somehow the guy gets it. There's there's the pass that sends it to overtime, obviously, which is, I still to this day when I see footage of it, I think, did that get completed? How did the guy catch it? How did Bryce put it at the right spot? And then the game winner in whatever it was, triple overtime to
Mechie.
to Mechie, yeah. Which is, again, it's a short, quick pass, but there's such a small window to complete that and make that play happen. And Bryce's accuracy also came amidst, I would say, maybe not the best protection that any Alabama quarterback has ever had. So he's making a lot of those throws under pretty intense pressure.
100%. And when you're scrambling too, as Bryce was, and again, we
Mm-hmm.
mentioned making something out of nothing, you got to put the throw on the money, because those are situations where it's like a jailbreak, and you could turn it over at an instant. But he found his receivers, crossing horizontally, like coming back to him, and he just put it right on the money and gave them an opportunity to make a play and often score a touchdown.
And
So
and
it's a good pick.
I think also that's part of what's happening for him now in the NFL is, it takes a little time for some guys to adjust to the speed of the game, but once you're seeing it and once it's all slowed down for you a little bit, you're starting to see Bryce fit into those similar tiny windows at the NFL level. And at the end of the season, he looked a lot like the old Bryce we knew, just sort of making things happen when there was seemingly nothing to do.
Yeah, you're not going to go wrong with Tua or Bryce when it comes to accuracy. So good picks by us, I'll say. What's the next category?
Mobility, Ben, a late arrival to Alabama football to have mobile quarterbacks, but there's been a few notable ones now.
There are several that we could choose from. One guy that I was always, it always made me like sick to my stomach that we only got to see him play 1 year as the starter. It's Blake Sims.
Yeah.
In 2014, he's my pick for mobility, and it's just wild that a lot of people, I think, expected him to be nothing but a mobile quarterback, right? A guy who was going to win a lot of games and gain a lot of yards and convert a lot of first downs with his legs, which he did. And there were many instances of that. But Lane Kiffin, in his first year as the offensive coordinator, turned this guy into one of the best passers in Alabama history. He broke records throwing the ball. I believe for yardage during a season, he threw a lot of touchdown passes, and that obviously has everything to do with scheming an offense around a piece like Amari Cooper at wide receiver. All that being said, though, Blake Sims, in my eyes, is the best scrambler in Alabama history because of his instincts, right? To me, he always had the best instincts to escape the pocket and find that first down marker at the most critical points in big games. You go back to that LSU game in 2014 when he leads a drive, I think, with less than a minute and no timeouts at Baton Rouge. It's just unbelievable the plays that he was making with his legs. I was so shocked that there weren't more design runs for Blake Sims, just given his athletic ability that he had. But again, you're building an offense around getting the ball in the hands of your best playmaker in Amari Cooper and Blake Sims. I mean, if you want to talk about arm, this guy threw one of the best deep balls that I can
Yeah,
remember in
we
Alabama
we
history,
haven't
whether it
mentioned
was
him yet, but and we should have.
he was finding Amari Cooper, DeAndre White, Kenyon Drake in some cases with these bombs downfield. So Blake Sims, an excellent all-around quarterback, one of the best players, I think, and most underrated players of the Saban era. But the way this guy ran, it was unbelievable. I'm surprised he didn't do it even more than he did. He would have been even more dangerous than he was. So he's my pick. Underrated player, excellent mobile quarterback.
Yeah, and my sort of iconic Blake Sims mobility play in my brain came against Texas A&M, where
Yes.
it was it was one of those where you see him taking off and you think this is going to be a 10 or 15-yard gain, and somehow he fires through this gap between multiple defenders, and it's like, oh well, they're not going to catch him.
I
That
think that it's because he juked a Texas A&M defender out of his
Yeah,
shoes, and I remember I think the Vern Lunk was called on that. He goes, "Wow!" and then he jukes the guy, and he goes, "Wow again!"
yeah, one of the ugliest blowouts I think maybe
It's
in the
like
Saban era.
52-0. I
Yeah.
think it was
It was a
unbelievable. He was incredible.
backbreaker for
Yeah.
Kevin Sumlin.
Well,
Uh,
who's your pick?
my I'm gonna go with Jalen Hurts here. And even though he's, I mean, we've seen faster guys. I think Blake Sims and Jalen Milrow are both, in terms of pure foot speed, definitely faster than Jalen Hurts. But Jalen was a different kind of mobility in that he had that physicality to the way that he ran, and he delivered hits. He delivered punishment when he ran, and I think that's so important for a mobile quarterback. I mean, I've, if we want to talk about maybe the weak point why Tua isn't number one in every category, it's because not everybody's built to run and take hits from linebackers and defensive linemen. And Jalen Hurts got up every time and kept running. Had some games where truly I think the power of his running came through and was a key element to those games. I think about one of the Tennessee games that he played in. I can remember him having multiple plays where he had to run through a defender to make the play, and it was no issue. And we've seen that continue in the NFL. Obviously, there's an entire play built around just how strong Jalen Hurts' legs are, and basically nobody else can run it except for his team. So I think if I had to have a quarterback that I knew was going to run more than 5 times a game, I want him to be built like Jalen Hurts. I want to know he's going to get back up every time.
Yeah, for sure. It's a good pick. I mean, he scored so many touchdowns with his legs, short runs, long runs. I mean, they weren't even doing the tush push back then. Obviously, he did that at the next level. But you're right. I mean, he was more of a north south runner as a quarterback than an east west.
But made
And a
some
guy
great cuts. Like, I mean,
he did.
against LSU and Clemson, both, he had some huge plays that he made with his legs.
Yeah, and you say like he doesn't he's not as fast as some guys, and that's absolutely true. But he's still fast. Like I mean, he
Hmm.
was still super fast, especially in the open field. So it's a really good pick. I like the way he ran the ball, and that was a big reason Alabama won so many games when he was starting quarterback. So good pick.
All right, our final category here, Ben. We're talking about intangibles. You can say that's leadership for other guys. You can say that's sort of coming through in the clutch. These are just the things that are not visible in a combine scenario, but that came through in a big way for these guys.
This is tough, because at first I thought we were doing leadership and then intangibles, but you're right. Like leadership is an intangible, in at least for the purposes of this conversation. And there are a couple of guys that I thought of for this because all these guys possess so many of these things. I think though, like ultimately, I'll go with AJ McCarron. I mean, the guy is still, I think, the winningest quarterback in the history of Alabama as a
I
starter.
think he would have to be just based
A,
on how many games he started. Yeah.
a 3-year starter, the guy who obviously, set the tone just as a winner in the Saban era, won 2 straight championships. So, I mean, look, and he could make the throws. I mean, he was somewhat mobile even for his position. Obviously, not compared to some of these other guys, but he was a playmaker. He was clutch. I mean, there were so many drives that you can think of. Obviously, the LSU drive in 2012 is the one that everybody thinks of. But AJ McCarron was super clutch, even in the kick six game, right? I mean, the guy's standing in his own end zone late in the game and throws a 99-yard bomb to Amari Cooper for the go-ahead touchdown to potentially win that game. It obviously didn't turn out that way. But AJ McCarron was just kind of a guy who had it all in the sense of he was a winner, he was a leader, he could make the throws when they counted most. He would find clutch guys like Kevin Norwood, guys like Amari Cooper. He knew where his weapons were. He didn't make a lot of mistakes. I mean, he had his Heisman finalist season, I think, where he had like 30 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, something like that. So his touchdown to interception ratio was unbelievable. So he had that accuracy chip too in a lot of ways. So I think I'm going to have to go with AJ McCarron just strictly based on the winning that he was able to accomplish while he was at Alabama. And his leadership, I think, is right up there with anybody. But I mean, you look at something like the 2012 Notre Dame game when he and Barrett Jones are pushing and shoving,
Yeah.
but they, make up by the end of it. And then it's like, well, what, who's the leader in that circumstance, right? And at the end, they're both saying I was right. But happy that they won the championship. So a lot of great moments from AJ McCarron. I think like if you're having a conversation about the best quarterbacks, building the best quarterback at Alabama, he can't be out of the conversation.
And I think he also sort of, whether he set the tone or whether he just happened to be sort of the perfect embodiment of those teams, he does kind of like his personality kind of overlays with the personality of that 2011 through 13 teams where he's kind of prickly. If you've ever talked to AJ or you've seen him talking, in podcasts and interviews, he's a little abrasive, and but like fully focused on the task, right? Like not
competitive,
not a flashy, fun, smiling guy. He was very intense, very competitive. Yes. And
yeah,
I think
he embodied
he's like the
Nick's
symbol for those teams.
Yeah, and he embodied Nick Saban a lot. I think
Sure.
that was kind of clear that he kind of wanted to have a Saban vibe when he was talking to the press, right? Fairly short with his answers, that kind of a thing. That seemed like a deliberate move on his part. But look, if you're going to try to embody somebody, why not your head coach who
Sure.
was as successful as Nick Saban? So, all right, what about you? Intangibles.
I think that's a great pick. I'm gonna throw some more love to Jake Coker here, and I don't know that I would consider him the leader of that 2015 team in the same way that some of these other quarterbacks were clearly the sort of emotional leader of their teams. But I think Coker provided something that was very real and intangible to that team. He had a toughness about him and a resilience that I think probably somewhat came from his personal history as a guy who had gone through an injury that a lot of people thought would be kind of a career-ending injury, that took his knee out, really caused him to transfer in the first place to Alabama, and rebounds from that, doesn't win the starting job, and waits for his opportunity and took advantage of it and kind of took over that team and led them to the ultimate goal. But I mean, you think about what things felt like after that early season loss to Ole Miss. It was kind of a here we go again from 2014. Like, is this team just one thing short of being a championship team again? Do they not have the ability to figure it all out? And Coker gives them, I think, some calmness and stability back there. But I think also there were moments where he would make plays that I think energized the team in a real way. And I would point to that South Carolina game that was a little contentious, and Coker made a run, a very physical run where I think he delivered a punishing hit to his tackler at the end of the play. And I can remember thinking the whole team lit up after that happened. I think he had a similar moment in the Iron Bowl that year. Always a tough game, not one of the better Auburn teams, but I think Coker was a guy whose job was mainly don't mess this up. We have Derrick Henry, we have an incredible receiving core, and we just need you to not make mistakes. And I think he went above and beyond that. I think there were moments where he created things that he wasn't expected to create, and it really put the team over the top.
Yeah, for sure. I think I want to say that was Texas A&M where he delivered that blow.
He may have had that one in that game too. Yeah,
where everybody kind of rallied around him. You're right. Like, this is a good pick because, again, like, he doesn't, other than his arm, which we discussed earlier, he doesn't have like something that stands out in the sense that, like, NFL scouts see this and they're going to draft him first or second round or whatever. But intangibles, Jake Coker, those are synonymous in a lot of ways. And I think you're right for everything that you said. I had a chance to talk to Reggie Ragland a couple of years ago before a big Alabama game, and I asked him about Jake Coker, and he lit up. And he just talked about how great of a teammate he was, how great of a person he was, what kind of a leader he was, how they did rally around him during that 2015 season. So he obviously had an effect on the rest of the roster, and that's what you want when it comes to leadership. That's a really good pick. I actually thought about picking Jalen Milroe in the leadership category because he seems like a guy who, again, has an impact on his teammates, right? Somebody who represents the program in a first-class way, is able to really communicate to his teammates like what is wanted, what they need to do, and obviously was able to have a lot of clutch moments himself in big games, and we've talked about it ad nauseum on this show. I mean, the guy led the Lank movement, right? Like, he was obviously influential, whether you like it or not at this point. And I know fans are like ready to leave certain things behind when it comes to like the Milroe era. But I mean, that was something that, other teammates really bought into. You saw when Jalen Milroe would score one of his many rushing touchdowns, guys would rally around him, celebrate with him. He was somebody I think the team really believed in as their leader and as their quarterback. And, you've heard sort of like rumblings that, one big reason that Kalen DeBoer didn't bench Jalen Milroe in 2024 was he could have lost the team as a result of benching Milroe at whatever point during the season. So that's a possibility. But also Jalen Hurts was going to be another pick of mine with intangibles, just because he was so unconventional as a quarterback. The way he won games was just however he could win games. It's like not a guarantee that he's going to throw it, not even a guarantee that he's going to run it. He's just going to figure out how to win a game.
Well,
and he's doing that at the next level.
In terms of a one game, one moment scenario, I think Jalen Hurts has arguably one of the greatest moments of displaying intangibles in college football history in the 2018 SEC championship game. I don't know that there's a better individual example of a guy sort of having the juice in a moment I mean, we've talked about it ad nauseum on this podcast, but yeah, that's an all-time moment in intangibles history in college football.
All right, we built the perfect Alabama quarterback here, Matt. Whoever is right will let the listeners, the viewers decide. I think it was me, but we'll take a break and we're going to do some blind rankings when we come back. So stick around. Welcome back to Beat Everyone. I'm Ben Flanagan. I'm here with Beat Everyone producer Matt Scalici. Matt, we just built the perfect Alabama quarterback. Now it's time to do some blind rankings. So where are we going to start here?
Ben, I'm gonna give you yours first here. So you're up to the plate, and you're gonna blind rank offensive coordinators for Alabama. These are all from the Saban era, but there are more than we're just doing 5 here. So there are obviously more than that, and there's gonna be some names that are not on this list, and you're gonna have to make some tough decisions based on that.
I'm ready.
All right, first up, Lane Kiffin.
Lane Kiffin, it would be fine to put him at number 1, I think, just considering all the success that he had. He wins an SEC championship all 3 years. He makes the college football playoff all 3 years, wins a national championship. He develops quarterbacks who nobody expected to be great quarterbacks in Blake Sims, Jake Coker, and Jalen Hurts as a true freshman. So, I mean, the guy's success is unquestionable. So, like, I think I just talked myself into putting him at number 1. But I still think I'm going to play it safe and put him at number 2. Lane Kiffin, number 2.
A risky move in and of itself, Ben. We'll see how that goes. All right, Mike Loxley is your next one.
3. I think you got to put him at 3, just considering how good Alabama's offense was in 2018. And that's really the season that is his legacy as an Alabama OC. And I only think of one season where Mike Loxley was the OC, and Alabama was just an unstoppable offensive force that year. And he had plenty of pieces to work with, and a great quarterback in Tua, and the wide receiving core of Devontae Smith, Jerry Jeudy, and Henry Ruggs, and Jalen Waddle, obviously, as a true freshman. So I think I'm going to go with Loxley at 3.
All right. Jim McElwain.
Okay. Now I feel like you're putting me in a corner here. I'm going to go 4 with McElwain. You could trust him. He was super dependable. He ran the damn ball, right? Like he was kind of like the classic Saban offensive coordinator. Balance was the name of the game, which is what Saban always wanted in terms of running a pro-style offense. He was super dependable, trustworthy. He was going to get results, and he was going to do it the old-fashioned way. So everybody at Alabama has so much respect for Jim McElwain. So 4 seems disrespectful, but considering where we're going with this, I'm going to put him at number 4. He ain't going number 5.
Brought the pistol into the Alabama offense. All right, Brian Dable.
Oh man, you did well with this, Matt.
I can't make it too easy for you.
Yeah, I know. I just am trying to think. Who are you going to give me last? Because they're going to go 1, they're going to go 5, and I got to go Dable at 1 because I think I know where we're going with 5. And Brian Dable, again, 1 season, but he won a national championship. He called up one of the best play in Alabama football history.
Yeah.
Like not offensive or defensive. He called the play, and it won a national title in walk-off fashion, a deep ball when nobody expected it to, from arguably Alabama's best quarterback to inarguably its best receiver of all time. Would I have picked him as the number 1 Alabama offensive coordinator ever? No, but I'm okay with it considering the 1 season he was in the position. He won a national championship and called the best play ever. So Dable's number 1. I can live with it.
And I would say I think his career has kind of held up pretty well for the Alabama OCs comparatively, because he's had a really nice career in the NFL since that time.
Yeah. He was coach of the year 1 year.
Yeah, that's right. All right, Ben, your number 5 that you left the spot for is Bill O'Brien.
Yes. Okay. All right. The risk paid off here. He was going to be.
I couldn't give you Sarkisian. That's too much of a slam dunk. I feel like.
I was saving the 1 spot for Sarkisian and the 5 spot for O'Brien. So I haven't made a perfect list, but it's as close as it's going to get.
I think you can feel okay about that list.
Yeah, my favorite thing about Bill O'Brien is whenever Jahmyr Gibbs is having a great game for the Detroit Lions, Bill O'Brien starts trending online.
That's right.
And every Alabama fan knows why, and they're the reason that it's trending.
And look, like the guy ultimately, the team got to the national championship game under Bill O'Brien. Am I giving him too much credit by phrasing it that way? Maybe, but inarguably, he was the offensive coordinator for a very successful team and a successful offense.
He was. I mean, listen, I used to kind of defend him to a degree because he coached a Heisman winner. He
That's
coached
right.
2,000-yard receivers in the same season, and Jamison Williams and John Mechie. He coached a 1,000-yard rusher that season in Brian Robinson. So that has to be the product of a great offensive coordinator. But I think any Alabama fan who paid attention during that season knows that that's not how they feel.
Well,
right?
the other ones we listed all were a part of national championships.
That's right. And he was leading in the 4th quarter. And so it's like of a national championship game. So he was close, but I don't think any Alabama fan would place him any higher than where we've put him in these blind rankings. That's just the way it is.
I think you can feel good about it, Ben.
All right. Thank you. I think I win. I won that, right? There's no winners in this scenario, but I won.
Yeah.
All right. Well, it's time to switch gears here, Matt, and we're going to talk about the scariest players. So rank these scary Alabama players without knowing who comes next. Okay.
I feel like I'll be good at this because I've stood next to all of them in press scenarios, and I've felt the fear myself internally.
Yeah. Well, also think if you're a defender, the fear that will go through your mind and body if you're on the other side of the line of scrimmage, right? And you're having to look them in the eye and know that they're either going to run past you or through you. Okay. So, first name from this list, Rolando McClain.
I'm not gonna feel bad about if I put him at number one because I think Rolando. It's not just the actual physical form of him, which is unbelievable. I mean, dude looked like a supervillain from a Marvel movie, but he had such a chip on his shoulder. He was such a. I don't mean this on a personal level, Rolando, but he was so mean. He had the intensity about him all the time. I feel okay about putting him number one. I'm gonna go ahead and
Whoa.
do it.
Whoa. Okay. Out of the
Yeah,
gate here. All right.
yeah.
Well, we'll see. How about Ryan Anderson?
Man, Ryan Anderson. Ryan Anderson is great. I think about the the I think it was a Sugar Bowl press conference where I asked him about players opting out of bowl games, and he gave me a great soundbite, and he was really annoyed that I even asked the question. So I got to live the fear out for that one a little bit. I'm gonna put Ryan at number 4
Ooh.
just because I think you got something up your sleeve.
The disrespect for Ryan Anderson. Do you hear this, Ryan Anderson? He's out there in the podcast world sometimes.
This is
Here he
this is
is.
a dangerous game for me.
This is the guy who you told, who you uttered the words Birmingham Biscuit Bowl to, Ryan. This is the guy who asked you that question and pissed you off before that game. So keep that in mind. It's one of the all-time greatest sound bites.
It was the
Nick
20. It
Saban
was the
era,
2017 Sugar Bowl, right?
congratulations. It was
Yeah,
something like that. Yeah,
yeah,
maybe. Good pick, or bad pick, I should say. All right, next up, Derrick Henry.
yeah. Okay, so this is why I was holding a couple of spots here. So I mean, Derrick Henry, if you're a defender, this is the nightmare scenario. And NFL guys talk about this all the time. Like the worst thing that could happen to you is that you're in the open field and it's you and Derrick Henry because it could go wrong for you so many ways. Getting stiff armed is probably the most humiliating thing that could happen. He also has the moves still to juke you out of your shoes. He has flat out speed to leave you chasing him. I mean, it's the worst case scenario if you're a defensive, if you're a back end of the defense player. I will put Derrick Henry number 3.
Okay, interesting. All right. They called this guy the Terminator, Matt. Will Anderson Jr. He's wreaking havoc for the Houston Texans in the NFL, but the guy was an absolute machine at Alabama. Where are you putting this guy? Think this through, Matt.
Yeah, I think Will Anderson is one of the best pure pass rushers that Alabama's ever had. You know, as good as every single position was at Alabama under Nick Saban, you could argue the one area where they didn't have a ton of super elite players at the next level was that sort of pass rusher off the edge, and Will Anderson was that all the way. I mean, he was almost impossible to defend. I'm gonna put Will Anderson at 5.
Okay. All right.
But
Look,
I look like a great player, and if I'm an offensive tackle or God forbid a tight end, it is probably incredibly scary.
okay. Well, do you think he's scarier than your number 2 pick here, J.K. Scott?
No. All right, here's how I'm gonna make my case for JK. All right. J.K. Scott. If I'm trying to play a field position battle with
That's
Alabama,
right. He's scary. He's scary.
J.K. is absolutely screwing me every time. He is putting me in the corner, deep into my own territory. I think as good as there ever has been at what he did, man, you got me there.
Scarier than Ryan Anderson, I guess. Scarier than Will Anderson. Scarier than Derrick Henry is J.K. Scott, according to Matt Scalici.
I rolled the dice, and
soft spoken, right? Like, you got some great sound bites out of him, I think, at that same media day in New Orleans, and it's all a front. This guy means business when he's playing, killer. Right? Yeah, he is you're right, cold-blooded killer when it comes to punting the ball. If you see this guy line up behind a long snapper at Alabama, you will be traveling far, right? And it's going to be bad for you. And you're going to be starting your next possession in a really unfortunate position. J.K. Scott, number 15 in crimson and white, your second scariest player in the history of Alabama football.
I hit on 17 basically is what I did here, and it busted. But I look, this is a great list of guys generally. And I'm sitting here running through my mind all the other guys that you could have had up your sleeve here. The one that you didn't name that I was thinking might come up was Reuben Foster, who I think is, despite having a very fun-loving personality, that guy rocked some people's worlds. That guy, I feel like there are people who can still remember what it felt like to get hit by Reuben Foster.
Yeah, human heat-seeking missile, to say the least. I mean, there are other guys too, like A'Shawn Robinson is somebody who people remember as being just like a scary-looking guy, Like, I mean, there's that famous photo of him and Derrick Henry at a press conference where, he's the angry dad, and they're in the principal's office, right? You've got Devontae Smith, even, people call the Slim Reaper a guy. If you're a DB lined up on the other side against Devontae Smith, he's going to smoke you. Tony Brown is another guy, a guy who walks, shirtless through the opposing team, stretching, pregame stretching.
Tony Brown's a great pick for this. Yeah.
Yeah. With no fear. So, yeah. But the first name that I thought of, Matt, was Ryan Anderson. That dude mean mugged like nobody else could have during the Nick Saban era. He was one of those hateful competitors, as Nick Saban described them.
Really, really intimidating person to talk to. And that's not always the case. Some of these guys that are huge and physically imposing, you go and talk to them and they're the sweetest guy you've ever talked to in your life. Ryan Anderson was pissed off a lot of the time, and just sort of had that edge to him even off the field. And look, I made a mistake there. I should have put Ryan Anderson higher for sure.
No, you did fine. It's blind ranking. That's what this is about. You don't know what's coming next, but you got to take risks. But yeah, I don't think you blew it though, because I mean, Rolando McClain at number 1. I mean, that's
I feel okay about my number 1 at least. Yeah.
Yeah, that's as scary as it gets on the other side. All right. Well, we blind ranked scariest players. We blind ranked offensive coordinators. We built the best Alabama quarterback using all the different types of skill sets and personalities that we grew to know and love during the Nick Saban era, especially. So, Matt, thanks for doing this. This was a lot of fun. We'll do it again really soon, and we'll put our thinking caps on next time so we don't look so foolish. So you can find Beat Everyone wherever you get your podcasts, on YouTube, everywhere. We appreciate you listening. He's Matt Scalici, Beat Everyone producer. I'm Ben Flanagan with AL.com. We'll see you next time.